Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Emsi webinars. Thank you for joining us today. As you're aware, we're going to be talking about how you can understand your key sectors in your local economic development area. We have with us today Will Cookson, who is our presenter, and he is the Director of Economic Development for Emsi, and Duncan Brown, who is our Senior Economist. So without any further ado, I'd like to hand over to you, Will. Good morning.
Morning, thanks Debbie. So yes, welcome to you all. Today we're going to be spending some time looking at how we can take labour market insight sourced through Emsi to really dig into and understand your key sectors in your area. As Debbie mentioned, we've got Duncan with us as well. So between us, we'll be taking you through that. Without further ado, here's the contents of what we're going to go through today. We'll have a quick look at Emsi data, a bit of a refresher for those that haven't been to one of our webinars recently, and also look at some of the new data that we're bringing in to the fold. Then we'll move on to look at the examples of sector analysis and how that can be used. And finally, we'll end up looking at how that can be taken forward. How can that insight be used to inform action? Just a quick summary of our mission, which is to use labour market data to inform and connect people, education and employers, really to use the insight that we can source to inform decision making and to inform strategic action. So Emsi data is a way of gaining a comprehensive perspective on local economies. And we do that through using a mixture of big data and structural data. So here you can see the structural data in regards to the labour market information. Then either side of that, you'll see job postings and online profiles, both sources of big data that provide context to the labour market information that sits in the middle. So traditional labour market information, essentially what we do at Emsi is we add 2 million data points from dozens of government data sources, many of which will be familiar to you, everything from HESA for higher education, completions and achievements, through to BRES, and we go as far out to DEFRA to understand agriculture. All of those data sets are modelled together and updated annually. And we're in the process of updating at present for this year. So that provides a fully integrated set of data with consistent taxonomies, modelled to remove suppressions, and then we can make projections going forward by 10 years, which will soon take us forward to 2028. And I say soon as we're in the process of updating our data. This provides detailed data down to local areas and to specific occupations and industries. So here you see our version of a Rubik's Cube. What we're really saying here is our occupations data goes down to 4-digit SOC, so very granular, very specific in regards to defining occupations. Our industry data, this is all structural data. Our industry data also goes down to 4-digit, can be very specific in regards to industries. And then in terms of location, we go down to a local authority level, or LAU1. And the reason we're looking at this as a cube is it can be sliced and diced in either way. So you can look at it in a very specific way, looking just at occupations by a particular location, or you can combine locations to look at a broader geography, broader range of occupations and industries. Job postings, I mentioned, source of big data. We have 40 million unique online job vacancies and recruitment advertisements. We then filter those to remove duplications. We can filter that by company, by job title, by skills, locations. You can search by keywords. Really useful source of data in that it provides context in regards to what's happening in a very fast moving local economies. It's really important source of data. We find that it provides a lot of insight, and it can move, as I said, at a faster rate. It gets updated by us monthly, and we have a data set that goes back to January 2016. In terms of online profiles, this may be a new data set to some of our existing customers that are on the webinar. Online profiles essentially is another part of the job postings, or the other side of the job postings type data, in that it provides context. It's a big data source. It provides context in regards to allowing you to understand the talent base in a particular local area. So it looks at online profiles, which will have details of people's current employment, potentially of their job history, of their skill set. This is built from opt-in sources where people have opted in to sharing their CVs and similar data sources, job applications, and so on. And it allows you to understand or give us insight in regards to the profiles of people that you have and the talent base that you have down to local authority level. We'll be doing much more work on this as we go through this year, but I thought it was useful to mention that now.
So this is where I come in, isn't it?
It is, Duncan.
So this is where I talk about how we bring it all together. So a lot of that data, our approach is to bring those different data sources together. We don't think that you can rely on any one of them on their own. So LMI is great for quantifying things. So if you press a key to move, because this is one of those fancy animation slides, then we think that quantified labour market information is central to analysis, because there's nothing more reliable in terms of giving you numbers of the jobs that are out there and their place in the labour market, their location and all of that. But it's kind of quite flat data in a way. It tells you where jobs are, in terms of geography, occupation, industry, but it doesn't tell you that much more about them. So that's why we add in different bits of other data. If you click it along again, so that's where we bring in the postings analytics and the online profiles, because they give that richness. They give us 40 million postings in terms of what employers are demanding. So it allows us to go more detailed than occupations, look at job titles. It allows us to look at more detailed geography and all of that. Online profiles allows us to do the same from the supply side. And actually, one of the limitations of labour market information is that sometimes it can be quite difficult to know what's driving things, whether it's demand or supply. So profiles and postings allow us to break that out. But the real power of them, and what we're looking to develop over this year and next, is, if you click it along again, to go down to a further layer of skill level analysis. So labour market information basically chunks up the labour market in terms of the jobs people do, but profiles and posting analytics, if you click it along again, allow us to look at much more detailed levels about the particular skills that employers are after. So is it, if it's a programmer, is it Java or Python that they're looking for? And by looking at the relationships between those skills, we can really get a handle from the bottom up in terms of what's driving labour market demand and what are the skills that really make the difference. And so that's kind of where our data is and where it's going, looking, not just at occupation level, but eventually getting into the detail of real skills as well. So that's our approach to data. So if we move it along, we've actually got some examples of how we can attack the problem of understanding key sectors in a local labour market. And what we've got here is just a selection of data to just sort of show you the journey that you can go through and using data to look at what are some priority sectors and then what those sectors look like in terms of particular issues facing them. So if we move through to our first slide on this, so this is a chart that we use quite a lot. We've used it in a few webinars before. It's our StrengthsFinder chart. And so what we do is we plot each industry cluster within a location. We've chosen Gloucestershire today, which is where Will lives, it should be said. And we've plotted each of those clusters by the location quotient, which is a measure of how concentrated they are in a local economy. So a location quotient of 1 means that you've got the same as the national number of jobs suggests. If it's above 1, it's more. And then the UK growth level. So we use the UK growth level because it shows how much potential for growth there is, how many jobs are being created if you can capture them to your area. And so those in the top right are what we call strengths. They are concentrations in Gloucestershire and they're growing nationally. So you've got a lot of them on the right-hand side there, things like metalworking technology, vehicle and defence, downstream metal, which are kind of heavy industry. You've also got professional services at the top there. Not so much of a concentration, but it is one and it is growing quite well. Those ones on the top left are what we call opportunities, because Gloucestershire isn't specialised in them, but they are growing fast. And what we've done is we've picked one of the opportunities there, digital, to kind of have a look at, to sort of see what it looks like within the Gloucestershire economy and how that might be built upon. So if we go on to the next one. So the first thing we want to look at is just job trends over time. And so the green line here is Gloucestershire's jobs, and the dark blue line there is the UK job total from 2003 projected out to 2028. This is our newest data that will be arriving in our tools very shortly. And what you can see there, and so the UK job number is made so it's equivalent to the size of the Gloucestershire labour market, so it's more comparable. And so what you can see there is that overall, Gloucestershire is kind of keeping pace, if a little behind the UK trend. It's quite volatile. That often happens in local economies, and digital is quite volatile because it's overall fast growing, and so you get quite a lot of churn there. But it's just that little bit behind. So it's kind of keeping pace, but not quite. So you can see that sort of back in 2008, I think that is, there were 7,200 jobs in Gloucestershire, and it rose up to 10,100 a couple of years back, and it's slipped back since then. So yeah, so that's kind of the overall background. It's a sort of a reasonable digital cluster, but it's not really kind of setting itself apart from the national trend on that sort of raw quantitative basis. So if we go to the next layer, we can actually look at where the jobs are located within Gloucestershire. So the chart on the left, both of these charts use what are called middle layer super output areas, which are a very detailed level of geography that the ONS creates. And so the chart on the left looks at raw job numbers, and you can see that sort of there's one yellow patch which has more than 1,000 jobs in there. Will might be able to work out where that is geographically.
Testing my local knowledge here.
But then there's the chart on the right uses location quotient, and so what it does is it shows where the jobs are concentrated. So that little blob of yellow at the bottom there doesn't have a lot of jobs in there in sort of volume terms, but compared to the local labour market and the number of jobs there, it is really quite high. So that gives you a sense of sort of how the actual number of jobs and their concentration can change. And you can see there's big variation by areas. So actually a lot of Gloucestershire has very few digital jobs in it by comparison to the size of the local labour market. You can see on that right-hand chart there are some areas which are dark blue and have a location quotient near 0, which suggests that they've got very few, whereas that yellow area there has got 3 times the number of jobs that a labour market of its size would have if you had the national level there. So that's a real concentration within the regional economy. So if we go on to the next one, one of the things that we want to think about is what kind of work is demanded within the industry. And so what we do here is we use ONET task data, which we've done some modelling on, and we've connected to UK occupation. So ONET's a US database. And so you can see that the sort of the brighter coloured areas using a location quotient measure again are those that are the tasks that are most important in the Gloucestershire digital cluster compared to the average in the economy nationally. And so not surprisingly, interacting with computers comes high up, updating and using relevant knowledge, but you can also see resolving conflicts and negotiating with others is quite important, and developing plans and strategies as well. So there's quite a mix there. And then the darker ones are things like performing admin activities and performing general physical activities, which of course aren't that important in digital. So it gives you a sense of what kind of work is going on within the cluster. So if we go on to the next one, So those tasks are performed by occupations, and so what we've drawn out here are, I think it's about 10 or 11 occupations that are most critical to the digital cluster within Gloucestershire. So these are the ones that are concentrated most within that cluster compared to the wider economy. And unsurprisingly, the largest of them is programmers and software developers with 2,700 jobs. Not a lot of growth there, reflecting that the overall outlook is quite flat on our projection. Whereas you look at some of them and they're actually in decline. So IT engineers are declining because that's the end of the digital cluster that's kind of becoming less important. Telecoms engineers as well, whereas it's more the programmers and the web developers and the IT business analysts that are all in the 2 to 3% growth stakes, really. So significant job numbers. And as well as the growth rates, we also have there the openings numbers. So we project openings as a combination of meeting the needs of growth in terms of extra jobs, but also replacing workers leaving that occupational workforce as well. So you can see there that over the 5 years from 2019 to 2024, there's only 60 extra jobs, but we project 580 openings because there's a lot of churn in the labour market and a lot of people moving between occupations as well. And so that results in quite a significant number. So if we go on to the next one. So using our job postings data, we can look in a lot more detail at what's going on in recruitment terms. So the charts on the left look at the overall volumes, and this is across those 11 occupations that we were just looking at. And so you can see that typically there's about 2,000 job postings, unique job postings each month in Gloucestershire for these digital roles. And that's actually slightly increased over time. Perhaps more interesting is that those next two measures, so the median salary has actually gone up. So if you go back to sort of the 2016-2018 period, it was kind of high 30s trending towards middle 30s. And since 2019, it's moved much more into the 40,000 plus space, suggesting that the labour market's tightened. Another way you can see about labour market tightening is what we call posting intensity, where what we do is, because we gather all the job postings we see and then we deduplicate them, we can actually measure the number of unique postings compared to the number of duplicates we found. And that may be an indicator. It can vary as to posting activity and recruitment demand. So if people are really struggling to get workers or really need them quickly, they put more job postings on more job boards. And you can see that in the 2017 to 18 period, that went high, and through 2019, it's kind of returning to being high again, getting typically about 8 postings, 8 duplicate postings for every unique one. And then the chart on the right there looks at salary level. So we've just added in salary into our job postings data. And so what we've done here is just looked at some intervals, about £20,000 ranges each. And what you can see is that Gloucestershire digital job postings tend to be more at the sort of the 30 to £50,000 range, and a bit less likely to be at the £60,000 and above range than nationally. Of course, a lot of that reflects that there are some labour markets like London and Manchester and Leeds and so on, where there are much more of those jobs at the high end. And so this is probably pretty normal for an area like Gloucestershire's digital labour market. So if we go on to the next one. And so just to round off the data here, we've looked at the digital job postings in a different way by looking at the leading skills. So we've drawn off the top 20 skills that are in demand by the number of job postings. And this is across the whole period since the start of 2016. And so you can see that agile software development is highest. And then you've got communications and management in second and fourth, so some generic skills as well. But then you've also got the programming languages there, so SQL, JavaScript, C#, Java, and then further down C++ and Python. And as well as the posting numbers, we've also put the median salary for those skills. So rather than looking at it in terms of the median salary across all the postings, we just look at those that mention those skills. As you can see, there's a bit of variation here. And so if you look at agile software development, for example, you're much more likely to get a job offer of over 40, a job ad of over £40,000 salary offered for agile software development, and the same for Java and software engineering and Python further down, Then you offer, say, communications, which is much more in the mid-30s, and then right at the bottom there, customer service is down in the 20,000s, because of course a lot of those are more sort of IT support roles, so pay less. And so that's I think all the data we've got to go through as an example. So I think we're going to the next one, and it's back to you, Will.
Yes, just wanted to say thank you, Duncan. That was really useful, and I think what it demonstrated was that need to be able to look at both the big data sources, specifically we're looking at job postings, and combine that with looking at the structural data and the insight that provides in regards to occupations and in terms of quantifying growth. So thank you, I think that's really good, and it was nice to look at Gloucestershire, my home turf. I'm just looking now at whether we've got some questions. Bear with me a second. One question we've got is in regards to the Middlesoper output area level data. Is that going to be coming to the analyst platform? I think I can answer that. Not in the direct future. I think it's something that we have used within, or I know it's something that we have used within our consultation work and on specific projects. I think it does depend on whether you're looking at particular areas. It works well with urban areas, cities and towns, but it does vary somewhat. Duncan, is there anything you would like to add to that?
No, I think it works. It works generally pretty well, but we're experimenting with it at the moment in terms of taking our data to that next level. I think in terms of bringing it to the tool, it would be nice to do that, but it depends on the sort of making sure that the data works everywhere, because when you put things in software, it has to, but also making sure that it has sufficient value to all our customers. Obviously, with economic development customers, it's really powerful and interesting, and that's why we've used it on a few consultancy projects recently. So we have that capability available in terms of software in the future, maybe, but we haven't any immediate plans, no.
Thank you. There were no other questions, so I thought it'd be useful just to look at how ways in which the insight we've discussed today can be used to be taken forward, and really in regards to applying it to strategic actions. So here we've got really a list of particular questions that can be drawn from the kind of robust labour market information and economic intelligence that we've looked at. So from that deep dive that you can take into a sector, really that's a starting point. And I think it's important to reiterate that the local knowledge and understanding of a sector really enriches and adds another level to the kind of data that we've looked at today. Obviously, once you start to look at a sector in that way, it will raise questions, and potentially there's challenges and opportunities that can be further explored. But here are some that we think are relevant. What kind of businesses should you be seeking to attract within the sector? Where do you have a particular strength and other opportunities to further build on that strength? What kind of business growth should you be seeking to enable? And there's many ways in which you can look at that. You can look at that in regards to supporting it through directly approaching particular employers. You can look at that in regards to supply chain interventions and bringing supply chains together within a local area. And then there's an obvious link through to how can education provision ensure that you're getting the right skilled workforce for the sector. And one of the things I'm often discussing with customers is how can the presence of a sector create opportunities for local residents, which if you think of it from a LEP perspective or from a local authority perspective is really critical. And what kind of employment sites can attract business to locate in the region? So as we know, if you can get a hub and you can get you can support businesses to grow, and certain cities have done very well at this. Bristol's always a case that gets mentioned in regards to the digital sector in supporting micro businesses and enabling small enterprises to build and to tap into the supply chain of larger digital companies. But I think there's an opportunity there to explore how sites and space can be used, and also what kind of coordination and partnership activities can improve supply chain value and raise productivity. We know anecdotally from talking to our customers that often supply chain won't be aware of who else is around and available to connect with locally. Obviously, there's an opportunity there to facilitate that by bringing those organisations together. But obviously there is data that can be brought to that as well to understand what purchases have been made within your area and what purchases have been exported out of area, and where there's potential to increase what's been purchased in area. That's just a snapshot. I think the key thing to mention there is the data is really it can be really useful in terms of better understanding the sector, but then the big question and challenge that comes upon that is how that can be applied, what interventions can be put in place in order to really drive growth of a particular sector in your area. Happy to discuss that in more detail. Do send me an email if you'd like to pick up that conversation, which I think brings us to an end, but I should mention that we have our conference. So this will be our 5th national conference. It's taking place on the 13th and 14th of May. Couple of things to mention. Firstly, early bird tickets are still available until this Friday, which is the 28th from memory. The conference is taking place in Birmingham. It's over 2 days. And it's worth mentioning that on the 13th, between 4 and 6 p.m, there will be an economic development forum. More information to be shared on that shortly, but an opportunity to connect with your colleagues across the country and discuss best practice and so on and so forth. So I'd just like to thank you for attending. I'd like to thank Duncan for joining us. And that's it for now. Oh, and sorry, thank Debbie as well for hosting as well. I think that's everyone thanked.
Thank you, Will. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.